Today we'll be taking our first look at the legendary tier Italian cruiser Napoli. And before we get into things, I want to tell you that my mod selection includes Aiming System Mod 1, Propulsion Mod, Concealment Mod, Main Battery Reload Mod, and my commander is Francesco Mimbelli. All the stats that I'm about to list are obviously going to be influenced by these mods and this build, so just a little disclaimer before we get into it. Napoli has 59,200 hit points, which puts it right up there with the rest of the legendary tier cruisers. It's not the biggest hit points pool at the tier, but it's certainly good, especially in tandem with the Napoli's excellent armor. We'll get into that in a second, because I'm sure people out there are going to claim that somehow this cruiser is not supremely well armored. I don't know what standards they would be judging the armor by if they say that, but I have heard a little bit of it. In any case, before we get to the armor, Napoli has 9 254mm guns, a bit of an unusual size. 254mm AP can overmatch 17mm of armor. I don't know that that's ever really going to come into play, except against maybe the likes of Minotaur, for example. I think the Napoli might be able to overmatch that. The guns don't have the most impressive range with Mimbelli on there, only 15.5 km. They've got a fairly long reload at 14.6 seconds. Maximum HE shell damage is 3,450 with a 16% fire chance. Certainly useful against angled targets like this Montana out here. I think we're going to get a couple fires on him as this game goes on. And then the maximum AP shell damage is 6,150. I don't think the AP has any special penetration angles or special penetration qualities, but it does certainly hit hard and it can do a lot of damage. They're just very solid guns on the Napoli. Now, the Napoli also does have sap secondaries, and this is the only aspect about the ship with which I am disappointed. The base range on these secondaries is 5 kilometers, which means if you put the secondary module in the Napoli's module selection, you'll get the secondaries ranging out to 6 km, and from there you can build on top of that with maybe Hipper, for example, if you wanted to, provided he actually affects the range of cruiser secondaries. But I don't think you're going to get these secondaries out to 9 km, which is what you can get them out to on PC. I happen to own Napoli on PC, and I can tell you that Legends version feels basically exactly like it does on PC, aside from the range of the secondary guns. And that's too bad, because these sap secondaries can do quite a bit of damage, but I don't think they're really worth speccing into on this cruiser. We really don't have a good way at least, to spec into cruiser secondaries. So I just haven't. And I've been focused on mostly the main guns and the torpedoes, honestly. I've been dealing quite a bit of damage with those, and I think I am going to do that in this game. There are 4 torpedoes on either side of the Napoli ship. They have a quick 95-second reload. They do 13,900 maximum damage, which isn't a whole lot, but they do have a 13.5 kilometer range and a 56 knot speed. Now, 56 knots is actually incredibly slow, but 13.5 km is a lot of range, and you'd be surprised how often you can launch these torpedoes out there on reload and score some hits on some unsuspecting ships. AA we're going to gloss over because who cares? It doesn't actually counter CVs in a meaningful way. We'll go on to maneuverability instead. Now, with Mimbelli on there, I've got the maximum speed of Napoli up to an astounding 38.4 knots. Of course, this ship does not come with a speed boost, so 38 knots speed with just the commander build is absolutely excellent. This thing is lightning quick. Turning circle radius of 750 meters, which isn't exactly tight, but it's manageable, and a fairly long rudder shift of 11 seconds that, honestly, I don't really think is worth buffing. It seems just fine to me. The concealment, though, is one of the aspects where the Napoli really shines. With the concealment mod and Mikawa as one inspiration on my commander, I've got the Napoli's concealment down to 9.4 kilometers, which I think might be the best at legendary tier in terms of heavy cruisers. Maybe the Minotaur is slightly less conspicuous than this. I can't actually remember, but very stealthy. And then, of course, you have your trademark rolling or exhaust smoke generator found on the Italian cruisers, and you've got some heals. I think this all adds up together to make the Napoli quite robust. And at this point, I want to start calling some of the shots in this game because the gameplay from a lot of the ships involved here is somewhat questionable. Update Monday is like torture, and I don't know if you guys experienced it, but most of my games yesterday when this game was played were decided within 5-6 minutes or so. This was like the only one that wasn't, and it just happened to be a good enough game that I think shows off the Napoli pretty well. Anyway, we took 2 gearing torpedoes there, and we're down to like half health. We're still going to survive for the entire battle, and that's going to come down to the Napoli's armor scheme. And actually, let's take a moment now that that gearing has been dispatched to talk about that. Napoli is ridiculously well armored. Now, it does have a rather large 25mm schnoz and stern, but on the bow, which you can see, that 25mm plating, there's an icebreaker with, I think, 40mm of plating, and that effectively means that at close range, if the Napoli is pushing into something that can overmatch the 25mm section of the bow, it can actually be citadeled. The icebreaker should prevent that. And then the side armor is some of the tankiest armor to be found on a cruiser at basically any tier. Now, it does have a 30mm armor belt. Now, 30mm of armor can be overmatched by the likes of 430mm guns, but not much else. And as a result, the Napoli is incredibly tanky. In fact, you're going to see us bounce some Yamato shells very consistently. The key, of course, is going to be angling the side armor against large armor-piercing guns and not simply resorting to pointing your bow at them. Obviously, you can do that, and some of the shells are going to overmatch that 25mm plating. Some of them are going to shatter or bounce off the 40mm icebreaker. But what you want to do is bait enemy ships into shooting the side of your ship and be angled. It really is that simple. I think it's a concept that a lot of people are going to struggle with, but just understand if you point your bow straight at battleships in this thing, you'll probably be overmatched to some degree, and you will be damaged. But if you point your side armor and they shoot at it, then you will laugh with glee as their shells bounce off of you as if they're nothing. This is really one of the most heavily armored cruisers in the game, and certainly one of the best armored cruisers at Legendary tier. Probably only the Stalingrad is better. You can see here this Yamato is going to turn around this island. He shoots at us, and he hits us in the belt. All of his shells bounce. That's it. He hits us again. All of his shells bounce. No damage whatsoever. This thing is incredibly tanky. You just have to be careful about it, and you have to be careful about where you position. Now, if you noticed shortly before that Yamato shot me, some shells from the complete other side of the map came through and had my broadside. So I'm moving up here toward this island. There's the shells again. I want to put this island between myself and the enemy ships on the other side of the map. This Montana is on fairly low health. We are pointing our bow at him, and you can see he's going to do some damage to us with our bow pointing at him, but it's not going to be catastrophic damage, nor is the damage from the Stalingrad around the corner there going to be catastrophic, because of course our armor can bounce his shells too. And we're actually in range of the Montana now that our secondaries are doing some work. We managed to get the close quarters expert on the Montana with those secondaries, so they do have a little bit of a bite to them. It's just unfortunate I can't really justify speccing into the range. Now Stalingrad's in front of us, we've got the island between us and the rest of his enemy teammates over there, and so it's just a 1 versus 1 fight. He's bow tanking. It's going to be not super effective. We can simply switch to the HE, something that Stalingrad can't do. And we can put the HE right through his bow for high explosive penetrations, and of course we can light the fires. Stalingrad doesn't have a lot of HP left, and we've got a friendly destroyer in the cap behind him. All of our teammates are shooting at him. He goes down. That destroyer should now be able to secure the Charlie cap without any interference from the enemy team. which is a good thing because, as you can see, the enemy team is far ahead of us on points. I think our destroyer in that Charlie cap ended up playing the game quite well, but our other destroyer, which I believe was a Shimakaze, instantly left his spawn when the game started to join the other friendly destroyer, which is a Jutland. They both went into the same capture circle. Shimakaze ended up dying and not contributing too much to the game, and as a result, we are facing a bit of a deficit against the enemy team, and I'm on fairly low health. I could theoretically be taken out in one salvo if I don't angle properly, so I'm using this island as concealment to block the line of sight of this GK and whatever other ships are out there. And I'm just trying to farm as much damage off the GK as possible. You can see when a battleship is flat broadside, even one as heavily armored as the GK, and actually the GK isn't even flat broadside, but the AP can do a fair amount of damage to unangled battleships. We got almost 9k there against the GK. It's potent AP, to be sure, and I think you saw what it did against the Stalingrad earlier. Absolutely rips cruisers apart. But we're in danger of losing this game with the enemy team ahead on points. Now that the friendly destroyer has flipped Charlie, we do have the cap advantage, and we've got just a little under 4 minutes left to go in this game. So, provided none of our teammates sink, we'll be able to overtake the enemy team on points, and that'll be a lot easier if we can actually sink some of them. The GK is well on his way back to port. He's pushing in toward our last remaining friendly battleship, which is hugging the border of the map. Perhaps a questionable tactic under most circumstances, but given the context of this game, I don't really mind the fact that that battleship is way over there at the edge of the world trying to survive. That's what he should do. He should be trying to survive, because if he goes down, it very well could make the enemy points lead insurmountable, although we are catching up to them. Destroyer Jutland is going out there to shoot torpedoes at the GK. I've still got a fire burning on the GK, and the Jutland takes him out. That just leaves the Yamato and the final remaining enemy destroyer, which instead of, say, going into the Bravo cap and flipping that, or maybe potentially trying to come over to Charlie, which ultimately wouldn't be a good idea because I'm here. Instead of playing the objectives, I suspect that enemy destroyer is somewhere near the border of the map with our friendly battleship, trying to torpedo him, and the last destroyer is going over there for assistance. So I'm keeping myself concealed behind the islands here, just trying to get some fires or some AP penetrations into the Yamato, and farm maybe a little bit of extra damage. We've done 164,000 damage up until this point, and we're going to end the game by farming at least a little bit more. Last remaining destroyer is a Yugumo. He gets picked up by the Jutland, and theoretically, Yugumo should have no chance against Jutland. Jutland is a much better gunboat, and I think it's going to play out that way there. The Jutland is going to take out the Yugumo, and that's just going to leave the Yamato, which means, so long as we all survive, we'll win the game. Thus, I am not going to take my chances. I'm not going to push aggressively into the Yamato. There's no reason to do that. I tell my entire team to get back. I certainly don't want that battleship to go down. The points are very close. We've overtaken the enemy team, but a single ship getting sunk at the wrong moment could return the points lead to the enemy and result in our loss. So we're tracking which way the Yamato is going. We're sort of going to shadow him behind the island. We're not going to allow ourselves to get spotted, but we're going to look for an opportunity to farm a little bit more damage and essentially pad our stats in a safe way. And of course, there is a safe way to go about doing that. You'll see it here. We're not going to allow the Yamato to shoot at us. It's not worth it because we've already won. So what do I think about the Napoli? I think it's a very strong, very tanky cruiser. And given that it's a free bureau project that you can start and just sort of wait out, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to start it and play this cruiser. It's not really like the Italian tech tree line in that that line, of course, has access to SAP main guns. This one doesn't. It's more of a classic heavy cruiser with a smokescreen and excellent concealment and excellent tankiness. I think that goes a long way, and I think the ship is well worth pursuing. I actually like it the most out of any of the new ships this update, including Pommern and any of the new Pan-Asian cruisers. I will, of course, be doing videos on those in the coming days, but I wanted to start off with the Napoli, just because I like it the most. And now as this game winds down, we take one last shot at the Yamato, farming our damage total up to 181,000 and getting the high caliber medal. I think not a bad result in the Napoli, considering the torture I had to go through to get it, with the way teams were playing. And, yeah, a cruiser that I would recommend. I think it's well worth getting. It's probably my favorite premium. Well, I guess it's not premium. It's one of my favorite Italian cruisers, though, to be sure. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.